Good evening and thank you for joining us. I know we did say that we would be starting at 6:30, but we thought we'd go live just to make sure that the audio is working tonight. And if you can hear us, if you're viewing, if you're tuned in live with us, just give us a signal to let us know that the audio is in fact working fine. What are we looking at here, Kim? Kim is our producer tonight, Constable Kim Spring. What are we looking like here, Kim?
So far we look so good.
Okay, good. And of course, we're going to be speaking this evening with the Assistant Commissioner of Police in charge of operations, ACOP Martin Weekes. Mr. Weekes is a long-serving member of the Bermuda Police Service, a long-serving police officer. And this evening, we're going to be finding out from Mr. Weekes how, in fact, the Bermuda Police Service works in terms of its operations. We're going to be talking about things like policies and the fact that the Bermuda Police Service is now seeking to become more transparent. That is one of the directives that we've had handed down from the Commissioner, Mr. Stephen Corbishley. So, Mr. Weekes, let's come right over to you. Tell us a bit about Mr. Martin Weekes in terms of his policing career.
Well, Gary, I've been a policeman for some time now. I joined in the 1970s back in the UK, where I'm from. I came over to Bermuda in 1988, so I've been with the Bermuda Police Service for about 32 years now. And I came here as a constable, and I've worked across the service in various different areas, but mainly in the community policing side of business. Some people might remember me when I was the parish constable in Smith's Parish for many years, and then later in the schools program, where I ran the schools program and specifically operated the schools program in the East End. So all of the East End primary schools and Clearwater Middle School was mine.
You mentioned community policing, and that is something that the BPS had moved away from for a bit. Under the new commissioner, we've seen it reintroduced. What do you think the value of community policing is?
Well, I'd hate to say that we moved away from community policing, Gary, because I don't think we ever really moved away. We just found that in sort of 2009, 10, 11, that kind of period, we were going through a very difficult period with gun crime, something that we'd never had before. And so Mr. De Silva, who was the commissioner at the time, looked to bring as many people into the front line, heavy-duty policing that was required for that period. And it meant that some things like roads policing and some of the community stuff that we were trying to do sort of fell by the wayside because we only have so many people, and there was a lot of new jobs that needed doing, and a lot of reassurance was required for the public that we needed to get out there and do that. So, but we've had the chance in recent years, and since Mr. Corbishley's been here, he's really pushed some changes in that area. We've got the parish constables out again in individual parishes as opposed to the community action teams that we had previously, although we've still got some parts of that going, and some of the jobs that they did are being done by the parish constables. But we have named parish constables in every parish. Those names and pictures are available, I believe, on the website.
Yes, they are.
And we encourage people to call their parish constable for any problems in their neighbourhoods that they see, because one of the policing methods that we use is the problem-oriented policing with partnership system, which requires us to talk to the public and find out what they think the problems are in their neighbourhood, and then using this system to help solve those problems, using partnerships with people like Works and Engineering and other government departments and non-profits who may be able to assist. So say the problem is a bunch of people sitting on a wall behind some bushes, being antisocial, annoying the neighbourhood. Well, we would work with people to get rid of those bushes and change the setting for the wall so it was no longer a little private place where people could do things that were annoying their neighbours. Just change. Designing out crime is one part of that.
On the topic of community policing, we have the situation where today a community police officer was announced for the corporation, or for the city of Hamilton rather, going to be working with the corporation of Hamilton.
That's correct.
We've already heard the argument, well, why a parish constable for the city of Hamilton? The city of Hamilton is not a parish.
Well, we've had one before, so this is not new. We've had a couple over the years. We've put out an advert earlier this year asking for some new faces to come to parishes, and PC Chris Douglas put himself forward to work this specific task. Because yes, whilst it's not a parish, the same problems exist in the city, and whilst there is a Pembroke parish constable, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in Pembroke that constable needs to do. If we go back to the 1980s, we used to have two parish constables per parish, except for Pembroke, which had, I think, 6 altogether. And some of those guys were specifically tasked with working in the city. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but we are looking to see what worked in the past and trying to bring some of that back. And a lot of that's because people, that's what they ask us for. They ask us to bring certain things back. Like we get a lot of calls asking us, can we bring back the road safety bus? And that's something we're actively trying to put together now, is a new road safety bus, bringing back some of the older things that people remember from their childhood and feel that helped police-community relations back in those days. And of course, we're still running the Outward Bound programme. It's been closed for a little bit because of the whole COVID thing.
Situation. Yes.
But we are actively trying to get that back up and running again for the summer, and also to try to reinvest in the Outward Bound programme and get that back to its heyday, if you like.
Now, viewers, we're going to remind you, that you have the option to, in fact, ask questions. You can just post your questions here on the feed, and we're going to have ACOP Weekes respond to those questions. You don't have to wait for your answers. He's going to respond to them live here, so it's not like you're going to send your answers and he's going to look at them and send a response to you tomorrow. Even. We have questions already?
No,
not yet.
I'm actually trying to find here on the site, because I'm a little tech challenged to try and find out where the questions will come in, because
as am I. You should
can't see any right now.
You should see it coming up on the feed. Now, in terms of operations, Mr. Weekes, we've seen a huge shift in terms of the transparency aspect of things that I mentioned early at the top when we kicked off. The Commissioner again indicated transparency has to be a big thing. There's going to be a move, for those of you who don't know yet, it hasn't been announced officially, that we're going to be putting a lot of the police policies and such up on the police website.
Right.
Why that move?
Yeah, that's again, we get a lot of questions. We get a lot of people talking to us, how do you do this? Or specifically looking for information on how we police. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is to go through all of our policies, and we have a lot of policies that govern every area of policing. But some of them, like our use of force policy, is something that the people need to know, because we police very different here from the way they do in the United States, for instance. And a lot of that is due to the training. It's due to our relationships with the UK and Canada, and we look to get best practice anywhere we can find it. But specifically, UK policing, Canadian policing is the way we look to do it, rather than the systems. And I can't say the United States, because the United States has so many different systems. There's no national standards in the United States for what policing looks like, where there is in the UK. And there is in most parts of Canada as well. And so we look to get best practice from them. We write our policies in the same manner. And what I want to do is to get those up on our police website, so that if you've got questions, you can go there and you can read our use of force policy, our taser policy, our promotions policy, our what else have we got on there? Driving policy, the policy we use to decide how we operate under the police conduct orders, for instance. That will all be on there. Our code of ethics. So a lot of the things that we do, or the way our police service is governed, we want to get those up on the website for people to read. So there's no secrets in these documents. There's a couple of them that we have to take some of the tactics out, obviously, but the bulk of them can go up on there and people can read them and find out how we police.
Use of force is an interesting one, because, of course, we've seen a lot of what is happening in the States with regards to the Black Lives Matter situation, or the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of that was spawned out of police brutality. We saw the situation with George Floyd, a police officer kneeling on another black man's neck. That kind of thing we don't see happening here in Bermuda. We don't see that kind of use of force here.
No, we don't, and that is because of the way we train people. No, our training is very specific on the continuum of force. That's the range of force that our officers are allowed to use and how they're allowed to use it and when they're allowed to use it. So it starts off with the verbal judo, if you like, at the start, trying to talk someone down, and it goes up to a gunshot. But to get all the way up there, you've got to go through. You don't just get to pull a gun every time something doesn't look quite right to you. And even the use of baton strikes or use of fists to distract someone are all governed by this policy and are very, very tightly trained to. Our officers go through use of force training every year, and they have to show that they can use all of our equipment in the proper manner, and also use certain hand techniques to arrest people and stuff like that. Now, one caveat to that is use of force never looks pretty. It's never going to look pretty because it's using force on someone to get them to do something they don't want to do. So it's never going to look pretty. But the point is, if you've got a policy and you've got good training, it's only going to be what's needed under the circumstances. The reasonableness is what we teach. It's got to be reasonable to what's happening, proportionate, if you like.
On the other side of that coin, there are those who might suggest that perhaps the Bermuda Police Service isn't firm enough in dealing with individuals, and so because of the perceived leniency, some individuals might think, okay, I can get away with doing a lot more.
I've had some phone calls like that, Gary, over the years. People calling up and saying we should be getting the cat o' nine tails out. And I had an interesting conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Eddie Lamb when he was the Commissioner of Prisons. Not long after he'd started there, he told me that he used to get phone calls from a lady. He didn't name her, but she used to call him all the time talking about, we should bring back the cat o' nine tails. You need to whip those boys. And he said about a year later, guess who shows up at Westgate? This lady's son. He said, first thing I did, pick up the phone and said, ma'am, would you like to come and witness the use of the cat o' nine tails, or are you happy for me to just get on and do it? Of course, that didn't go down very well, but unfortunately that's the thinking. Yeah, we've got to hurt those boys, we've got to do this to them, we've got to do that to them. But if we were to do that, there would be outrage, and rightly so, because it's not appropriate. This is not the 1960s. And, I'll be the first one to say that I suspect that the policing methods we used in the 1960s in this country were not appropriate. We've moved on an awful long way from there. Even from the 1980s when I first joined the Bermuda Police Service, our policies and our use of force training is miles away from where we were in those days.
It's been suggested that the move from a police force to a police service has led to a softer approach in dealing with crime and dealing with the criminal element. Any truth to that?
No, none whatsoever. We're still providing a service to people. There's just a name change. But the point of it was to not make us look softer, but to show that what we're here for. We're not here to create a police state. We are here to provide a service to the public, which is what the government funds it for, and that's why we do it. Everyone comes to work now, and they know that our mission statement is making Bermuda safer. And we ask people, what have you done today to make Bermuda safer? Because that's what we're here for. And it's what, going back to the problem-oriented policing with partnerships, we want people to tell us what the problem is. We don't get to decide, well, those boys are causing a nuisance there. Because they might not be. They might live right there. The people in the houses around them might be quite happy for them to be sitting off in those bushes. But if everyone in that neighbourhood is fed up with them, and they don't come from the neighbourhood and they're just being a nuisance, we want them to tell us that, and then we can help them design that out. But we're not going to be the ones just rocking up and saying, oh yeah, these guys are a nuisance, we got to deal with this. That's how we did it then. That's not how we do it now.
COVID-19 has influenced the way the Bermuda Police Service, it's influenced the whole country and the way things are done from the government right down to storekeepers, the way their operations now function. It has in fact also influenced the Bermuda Police Service, and you were the man in charge of that. How has that influenced the Bermuda Police Service in terms of day-to-day policing?
Yeah, I came to a meeting one day and heard, yeah, Mr. Weekes will be the gold commander for this COVID-19 situation. I'm going, oh, what? Really? Oh, okay. Well, that's great. I was very happy to be given the role, and it's kept me very busy. That's pretty much the only thing that I've been doing for the last 10 weeks or so. This is a very new situation for the Bermuda Police Service, like it's a new situation for everyone. There hasn't been a state of emergency called in this island since the 1970s. So there's nobody around who was in the Bermuda Police Service in the 1970s who's still working for us. So we literally have built this from the ground up. And, we've all seen the speed of change, the regulations come out, and immediately there's a press conference saying what everyone's going to be doing, and then, of course, everyone's running around trying to catch up on that and make sure that we're doing it right. And one of the things that I had to keep reminding both the officers from the Bermuda Police Service and the Bermuda Reserve Police who were working out there, but also the soldiers from the Bermuda Regiment who were working under the bigger national security umbrella, is that every time we made a decision about the regulations and enforcing those regulations, we had to be sure why we were doing it. And why we are doing it is for public health, not to create a police state, not because we can. And so, we didn't want to see hundreds of arrests. We didn't want to see hundreds of people being put before the courts for this stuff, because in nearly every case, what we were asking them not to do was normal behaviour. And the last thing we wanted to do was criminalise that normal behaviour. Don't get me wrong, we ended up putting some people in court, we ended up arresting some people. But often or not, it's because they repeat offended, because they were out in the middle of the night, two up on a bike, when the curfew's on. They were out committing other offences, like the guy lobster fishing, things that you couldn't do anyway, and then they were doing it whilst we were in the shelter in place. No one was being arrested because they went to the grocery store on the wrong day. No one was being arrested for being on a railway trail unless there was other aggravating factors, And that was the key. We had to make sure that all our officers every day were reminded of what we were doing it for. We put 2 tests for them. Is this going to cause, whatever the behaviour was that they were addressing, is it causing a public health problem, or is it contributing to the spread of the virus? And if it wasn't doing those 2 things, tell them to go home. Get them home, get them off the streets, and move on. No need for arrests, no need for court appearances. But if it's starting to do those things and they're doing it deliberately, or they're not responding to the opportunity to just stop and go home, then we had to take enforcement action.
There are some in the community who believe that the police did, in fact, there were situations where the police may have gone overboard and simply went about arresting people the minute they broke the curfew. No truth to that.
No truth to that, no.
In terms, again, of the COVID situation, how have officers been able to deal with this in the day-to-day performance of their duties?
It's been hard. It's been hard for officers and for the soldiers, who, of course, are less used to the day-to-day conflict. Because an officer who's regularly working uniform patrol and has to stop people and give them traffic tickets is used to a certain amount of resistance and a certain amount of, oh, why have I got to get a ticket? And in these cases, people are just about fed up with this already. The last thing they want is a police officer asking for their driver's licence or telling them what day of the week they should be or shouldn't be shopping. So there's had to be a lot of patience involved, and I've been very proud to say that our officers and the soldiers in the Bermuda Regiment have shown an inordinate amount of patience when dealing with these regulations. But on the other side, it can't be forgotten the patience that the public have shown. I mean, the compliance with curfews in particular is just incredible. We rarely see more than a couple of people out after curfew, and often it's because they had to get somewhere or do something, or they thought they were allowed to. I think the only area really we've had a lot of curfew problems in the last couple of weeks is on the marine side. We've still got a lot of people who aren't following the rules when it comes to boating, either finding ways to get around the whole raft up thing by parking a little bit further and all swimming together, or having too many people on boats, or just generally not being out after 10 o'clock, which I think is the current boating curfew. That's probably the area we've had the most issues with. The Coast Guard have been run off their feet, if you like.
And of course, this is not to deal with law enforcement as much as it is to ensure that we continue to flatten the line. Would I be correct in saying that?
It's just about health. It's not about law enforcement, it's about health. We have to enforce the regulations. That's our role. It's in the legislation. But we're trying to get compliance, not criminalise. So if we can keep people doing stuff that will keep the disease from spreading, then we've met our remit in this area.
Now remember, folks, you will have the opportunity, in fact, you have the opportunity now to start sending in your questions to ACOP Weekes, Assistant Commissioner of Police in charge of operations, Mr. Martin Weekes, and he's going to answer them. Nothing is taboo tonight. Mr. Weekes can handle himself, doesn't need me here to hold his hand, so just send your questions in and he's going to answer them. Mr. Weekes, one of the criticisms that we have is about police officers hiding in the bushes and doing speed checks.
Speed checks, yes.
Long-standing one.
Absolutely. Nobody likes getting a speeding ticket, but we get an awful lot of phone calls complaining about people speeding, and particularly after the shelter in place. I was getting a lot of phone calls saying, these people are crazy, they're driving like they've been let out of an asylum, and so we had to get back and do some enforcement in that area. And yes, we're out there running road speed checks. But, we have to balance this now, because it's not the only thing that's come back since we've been released from shelter in place. We're all aware of the headlines. There's been a lot of antisocial behaviour. We've had a murder, we've had a shooting, we've had some quite vicious attacks, which have all been on the front page of the newspaper. I don't need to go into the details of those. But, crime, if you like, is back as well. So we've got to balance the enforcement of the regulations, enforcement of road traffic issues, and also do a lot more in the way of reassurance patrols and investigation now. So we're pretty busy again right now.
The Bermuda Police Service has also embarked on an initiative to build relationships with the community, as opposed to just going out there and locking people up. What is the thinking behind that?
Well, again, you can compare our policing methods with the 1960s, where that's what we did. Tried to frighten people into not committing crime by arresting everyone for everything. There we had like 40 maybe people in just riding motorcycles, just doing traffic control. So people were scared of these guys on motorcycles with the mirror shades. And then we had the an equally large narcotics department that was out there roughing people up. We all heard the stories of how they policed in those days. And we're in a very different policing model now, if you like. It's been proven from studies all over the world that that kind of policing doesn't build trust, it doesn't build compliance, because people will find ways to get around it. They're far more likely to comply with things that they understand why it's being done, and it's being done in a friendly manner.
Section 315 of the Criminal Code, that has been a major sticking point for members of the community, stop and search and so on. It's felt that black men, young black males in particular, were the ones most targeted. Explain to the community why Section 315 was necessary.
Okay, Section 315F of the Criminal Code is based on a power granted to the UK Police. It requires a superintendent of police to identify, through intelligence-led policing, which areas have been or are likely to be issues with violence, and to allow them to put road checks in place where we can stop someone and search them in order to prevent violence. And that's specifically what it's for. We used this quite effectively during the 2009 to 2011 period, where we were getting a lot of shootings, and we searched about 11,000 people in that period. But as soon as that changed, as soon as the shootings dropped, so did our stop and search, and it goes up. We have statistics, and we've shown them to the public before. If you look at the graph, as the shootings go down, so does the stop and search go down. As the shootings go up, the stop and search goes up. And it's predominantly done in areas where there are large groups of people gathering, where there have been rumours or intelligence that there's going to be a problem, and it's done on the way in or out of those situations. So if we have a big concert where people are talking online, and that's where often we get our intelligence from, saying there's going to be a big fight, then we're going to have a lot of policemen doing a 315F stop check to try and make sure that no one's going down there with weapons.
One of the concerns that we've seen expressed in the public, and I have to go there, in terms of there seems to be a lot, we've seen it in the media, there's been talk of a lot of police officers being disciplined and such. Is it that we've seen more police officers committing offences, or is it that the management, the top brass in the BPS is now clamping down?
Okay, well, let's look at that from a bigger picture point of view. The Deputy Commissioner of Police, Mr. Darren Simons, it currently is the Deputy, is in charge of service discipline. I held that role for short periods prior to Mr. Simons being in place, so I have an idea of what it looks like working with the Independent Police Complaints Authority. And anecdotally, I can tell you that of the complaints against police that we get every year, 90% of them are that the police officer that dealt with them either was rude to them, wasn't polite to them, or didn't call them back to tell them what was going on, keep them informed. Of that 10% that wasn't the rudeness and just not keeping the complainant informed, of that 10%, a lot of that was due to relationship type issues that officers were having, complaints that they were doing things that weren't appropriate for a police officer to be doing. And then probably of that 10%, maybe 2% were complaints that a police officer had been violent in some way. And we are very, very clear that if a police officer is doing it and it's reported to us, we will treat it exactly the same as if a member of the public is involved. And that's where we are right now. We have a new, larger police conduct unit since we brought in the new police conduct regulations. And that's headed up by a superintendent now, where previously it was only a sergeant running it. We have a superintendent in charge of it, and we do take this stuff very seriously. And as part of Mr. Corbishley's transparency, that's a big chunk of that. We need to make sure that we're seen to deal with stuff properly, that we're not seen to be sweeping things under the rug, but that we give due process to it, and so everyone gets they're not guilty until proven innocent. It's the same way as in the courts. It's innocent until proved guilty. And it does take time to investigate these things. So we do thorough investigations. We share the results of those investigations with the Independent Police Complaints Authority, and then the Commissioner of Police decides where we'll go from there. But nothing is being swept under the carpet. And again, that's perhaps not how we used to do things in the past, but that is how we do things now.
A more transparent police service is a better police service, you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How
Gary.
so?
Because, again, the people are the police and the police are the people. There's a reason we're here.
Can you repeat that for the people in the back row to hear?
The people are the police and the police are the people. And Sir Robert Peel, the founder of the Metropolitan Police in England, said that. And that was one of his guiding principles of policing, that we are the police. Back in the early days of policing, people were just told, right, this month you've got to be the police person, the watchman. We've gradually moved on from there to having people paid to do the job, but we're paid to do it by the public because they don't want to do it. So we're there for them. We're there to do the will of the community. And if the community doesn't want us to do something, there's ways to change what we do. And some of it will come down from His Excellency the Governor, who's nominally in charge of us, and then the Minister of National Security, who also has a role to play in what we do, and then the Commissioner of Police. And we all get information in. We have what's called the Independent Advisory Group, which isn't the same thing as the complaints with the Police Complaints Authority. The Independent Advisory Group is chaired by, what's his name? Dean Paris, who
yes.
works at the hospital. And it consists of members of the public who have volunteered their time to help us with what we're doing and whether we're doing something wrong, whether we're hitting the right things for the community. Because they tell us, you tell us, the public tells us what it is that needs doing, and that's what we will police. So if it comes down from all of those areas that we shouldn't be doing a certain area of policing, then we're probably not going to put a lot of effort into that. We also have a public perception survey that we send out, and that we ask certain questions of the public. What is it they want to see us doing? And then we react to that. So if everyone says we want more road traffic policing, then we're going to put more people in that. If everyone says we want more clamping down on street drug dealing, then we're going to put more police officers into that. So we're very reactive in that way, but we're also always looking to find out what we should be doing to make Bermuda safer.
There is a ticklish issue of possession of marijuana, small amounts of cannabis, as it's called here. Police no longer prosecuting prosecuting individuals, I think, for less than 7 grams, is it?
Yeah, you're allowed to carry 7 grams. I mean, it's...
Can you provide some clarification, because people seem to think it's a free-for-all now?
Well, it's not a free-for-all. I mean, the legislation is out there. You can read that on the website, and most people will be aware that we're in a period now where consultation is going on for a lot of new legislation around it. So I'm not going to prejudge what that looks like, yes, because we don't know what the final version will look like. There's a number of things in that proposal about shops where you'll be able to buy and consume cannabis materials. There's as you say, the under 7 grams, you're allowed to be possession of that. We don't know where that's going to come out. We're obviously putting our 2 cents worth in, as well as health are as well, because obviously there's health concerns in addition to legislative concerns. I mean, we could go the way Canada has gone. I don't know yet. That's all coming down the pipeline. So, whilst I could give advice on where we are now, that it's a never-changing picture.
It's evolving.
Yeah, it's an evolving situation.
Now, we've mentioned at least twice that you have the opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Weekes. We haven't seen any questions popping up here, so we don't want to hear any complaints tomorrow morning that, we didn't hear this and we didn't hear that. This is your opportunity to ask questions of the Assistant Commissioner, Mr. Martin Weekes. It's either that, Mr. Weekes, or you're doing such a very good job that everything is being explained and there are no questions being asked.
Who knows, Gary? But anyway, yeah, absolutely happy to answer any policing questions.
There has already been announced that there will be a $4 million cut in the police budget. Do you see that impacting the way the Bermuda Police Service goes about providing its service to the community and making Bermuda safer?
Well,
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I mean, obviously I don't control the budget. That's the budget comes from the minister. And let's face it, as a country, we know that there's less money. So, it would be naive to think, the police budget will be fine. We won't have to take any cuts. Everyone's going to have to take cuts. Mr. De Silva, our previous commissioner, was famous for saying, we can't do more with less. So we can't add to what we're doing. We probably can't do all the things we're doing with less, but we will, we'll look to prioritise again the things that people think that need prioritising. So it will look different. If there was a massive change in the economy and we had to have a much, much smaller police service, we would still police Bermuda. It would probably not look exactly the way we police Bermuda now. But if we look to some of our overseas territories in the south of us here, they don't have as big a police service as we do because they don't have the money to support that. But they still police. They just police differently. And we cut our cloth according to what we got. We will still police and we will still look to be making Bermuda safer.
We have just about 2 minutes left, Mr. Weekes. Any appeals? We have a number of situations, a number of investigations that are ongoing. We have, of course, the Chevelle Dylan Burgess situation that we need the public's assistance. Then there's the incident where 5 thugs committed a heinous crime on Friday last with a brutal attack on a woman where they've left her, permanently damaged.
Yeah, very, very
injured.
nasty. Very nasty. And we encourage anyone who has any information to call the Crime Stoppers number. and or call the Bermuda Police Service. There is a portal where you can report stuff now online, as well as the 211 number, and if it's an emergency, call 911. With Mr. Chevelle, absolutely. I mean, you'll be aware that there's a $50,000 reward out there for information. So obviously there are some criteria you have to meet to get the $50,000. But please, please, if you know something, tell us or tell someone. If it's Crime Stoppers, if you want to do it anonymously, or if you want to call in to get that reward, that's all been posted online how you would go about doing that. But we encourage everyone, if you know even a little bit, to just let us know. And the same with the situation up in Cedar Hill, Warwick, that occurred over the weekend, or indeed the shooting down in St George's last week. We've had a number of things going on, and any information that you can provide to help us make this place safer, please put that information in.
Because of course the people are the police.
And the police are the people, Gary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weekes, for chatting with us this evening. Much
My pleasure.
appreciated. And continue to be with us, because I think we've started something here that we want to continue. And if you want to see more of discussions like this with members of the police service, senior members, or perhaps even Constable Kim Spring, who's our producer here tonight, or able producer, setting things up here for us this evening, drop us a line on our Facebook page and let us know what you want to hear, what you want to have discussed, so we can make this into more of a people's show, a community show, these Facebook Lives, so that you can learn more about your Bermuda Police Service. Thanks for being with us this evening.